Happy Friday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back for what is going to be nothing short of another jam-packed daily market update. As always, we have a hell of a lot to cover. We're going to be starting the video off by looking at the general interest in the cryptocurrency space, and we're going to continue to reiterate our opinion that right now is the perfect time to be interested in the crypto markets when the masses generally aren't. And actually, I feel that this has been a very trying week for some out there. Obviously, we have the conflict with Iran and Israel that, of course, has put pressure on the markets in the face of uncertainty. We have looked at Bitcoin's resilience in regards to geopolitical events based on the report that was published by BlackRock. Nothing fundamentally or technically has changed for us in regards to the direction we think the crypto space is going in. And ultimately, there are always going to be trials and tribulations, and this is why we put on the armor of technical analysis. We use the charts to be able to put our feet on something solid and give you our best prediction on what way we think the markets are generally going from an investment point of view, not a small time frame trading point of view. We don't think retail, 99% of retail, I'm talking to you guys on the other end of the camera, don't try and trade. If you want to be a trader, I can't convince you otherwise. Go ahead and do it, and you'll likely come to the same conclusion that we're sort of spouting off here. But it's been a trying week for the cryptocurrency space. But nothing fundamentally has changed. The markets, in my opinion, are very much still positioned for what is going to be an amazing 12 months. And there's always that sort of sentiment in regards to fatigue that we're seeing as the cryptocurrency space and the markets take another hit. But in the grand scheme of things, in the context of the charts and technically where things are at, things look great, guys. They really do, despite everything. And if you look at the sentiment over the past week on the back end of the Iran-Israel news, obviously we had news that the SEC appealed Ripple's case, and that could take as long as till 2026 to resolve. I'm still bullish on Ripple and XRP. I think Ripple's going to become one of the largest companies in America. It's going to take time, but I do think it will happen. And we're going to be talking about Ripple a little bit. So even despite in the face of this, the price action really hasn't matched the sentiment. And the price action, I think, for the crypto space generally is still in an amazing place. And we will take a look at that a little bit. But there's very low interest. So we're going to start the video off there. We'll look at some, in regards to Ripple, RealUSD is seeing some pretty insane minting going on. We'll show you a good account to follow in regards to that. HBO actually are coming out with a new documentary claiming to have cracked the true identity of the pseudonymous creator of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto. Now, I personally think it was probably the likes of the NSA and the UK intelligence service that created Bitcoin. I don't believe in the Satoshi narrative. I think Bitcoin maxis will eat each other alive, trying to come up with a reason with why they are essentially Bitcoin maximalists to cover their ultimate desire in regards to making money. That's why people are into Bitcoin. I think essentially, I think there are very few people that do truly believe that it is the route to freedom. I'm on the other end of the spectrum. I think it has a lot of kind of libertarian properties. I also think it fits a globalist agenda. So I'll leave my opinions at the door, but we will be looking into that. We've got some news in regards to the IMF, essentially going after El Salvador in regards to their Bitcoin usage. Who the hell are the IMF to tell anybody what to do? Certainly in El Salvador, but the International Monetary Fund, some more globalist sort of nonsense going on. Then we'll look at the charts, and of course today is a big day in regards to non-farm payroll. So jam-packed one indeed. We've got a hell of a lot to dive into. Let's start things off with looking at the general interest in the cryptocurrency market. And you can see it's pretty much non-existent. This is going back all the way since 2004. And if we look at the past 5 years, you know, we're still very much at bear market lows in regards to the space. This is going to come back in a big way. And if you're an investor in something, you want to be interested in it when nobody else is. And now is the time. Certainly when we look at those 10 altcoins that we looked at breaking out into phase twos, they're all beautifully positioned for that upside continuation. They're now in or have entered an uptrend, and we're yet to see the bulk of that take place. If we look at all those falling wedges, they're all still intact. Something like 13 or 14 coins we've looked at. Guys, again, now is a perfect time to become a patron. Lots of people joining. That's going to continue. We're going to cap it off at some point, so do get in before the masses kind of wake up to what we're on the cusp of. But when we look at interest, it's virtually non-existent. And retail keeps getting dealt blow after blow after blow. But in the grand scheme of things, I'm going to talk about that technically, the markets are in a great position. You know, did Bitcoin just really retest the splitter of this descending broadening channel? that's previously held you as resistance now flipped to support, ready for that continuation, which we have lots of technical confluence in regards to suggesting is going to happen. Telling you guys, hang in there. Persevere the persecution that the markets have to offer. This is why you need to become a technical analyst, because the noise really does get quieted down. Let's talk. Obviously, we had the SEC appealing the Ripple case. It's likely going to go to the Second Circuit. Ripple might do a cross appeal. This is likely going to sort of drag on till 2026, unless Trump wins, Gary Gensler gets thrown out. Either way, I don't think Gary Gensler is going to be the head of the SEC for much longer. If Harris wins, he's likely going to get promoted to Treasury, which I think is not something I'm really over the moon about. But if Trump wins, I think he could get basically thrown out, or Congress could do something to step in, and that's how it gets resolved quicker. But despite that, it's business as usual. And actually, in regards to Ripple's stablecoin, which is coming and going to be launched in Q4, we're seeing a lot going on, or the launch is essentially going to be used to as an auto bridge for assets. We're seeing a lot going on. 29 million Ripple just got minted by the Treasury. This is a great account to follow, by the way. This is the Ripple stablecoin tracker. You can see lots of sort of interesting people that cover Ripple regularly on Twitter also following this guy. Community account tracking the mint and redemption of Ripple's RealUSD, currently in beta testing. Don't click any links ever, guys, on anything, but I've been sort of paying attention to this and looking at all the minting that's been taking place. And it's sort of business as usual. Despite the largely negative news, I still think the price action is going to play out. Let's cover some fun news now. HBO documentary claims to have cracked the true identity of the pseudonymous creator of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto. It doesn't exist, guys. It says that its findings will shock the world, even the US election. Now, of course, they're very likely going to say this. The big reveal is scheduled to air next Wednesday at 2 a.m. CET, Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern. So I'll be watching this. I'll probably be reporting on it for you guys. Of course, it's on TV, so we couldn't live stream it, but it's essentially potentially claiming to have found the infamous Satoshi Nakamoto. It's likely going to put forward some takes on who it is. There's lots of them already out there. My best guess, and I'm not saying this to upset anybody because I know I always upset people when I say this, because, you know, it's kind of like finding out that Santa Claus isn't real. I don't believe there was a Satoshi Nakamoto. I believe the agenda is a global communistic one. And I think that a global currency is part of that agenda. And I think, you know, something like Bitcoin, it's very rare. There are there's two options here. There's either some sort of divine intervention with Bitcoin being given to us all, or it's planned, calculated in much the same way that how we ended up with a Federal Reserve was. A little bit darker in here. One light's just died. I do apologize for that, guys. So if you look at how the Federal Reserve was formed, and None Dare Call It a Conspiracy is a great book to read, by the way. We can maybe do a video on that book entirely because it's a brilliant one. The central bank, the Fed, was originally put forward as the Aldrich Bill, obviously on the back of Jekyll Island. And they basically said, no, look, didn't pass because they were concerned that they were going to give all the power to Wall Street. And then they said, no, we want to give the power to the people. So we'll put it in the government's hand, that the people obviously elect. We know there's a lot of nonsense with that. And then you had the Federal Reserve Act, and then that got passed in the name of defying Wall Street, even though everyone from Wall Street, like your JP Morgans, went and then directly works at the Federal Reserve. So they control two sides of the agenda. I can't help but feel like Bitcoin is a bit of that story. I could be totally wrong. I hope, by the way, I'm wrong, because I truly do think Bitcoin is doing some great things. That story from Bhutan, that could be such an amazing story if it comes off on the back end. And on the topic of all of this, and Bitcoin being the counterparty, official IMF press conference, the IMF wants El Salvador to limit to the public sector exposure to Bitcoin. Now, things could go horribly wrong if Bitcoin, let's say we entered a bear market. What does that mean for the country of El Salvador? And there is pushback to that. But what I want to do is actually play this clip, and then we're going to go on to the markets and, of course, what's taking place today in non-farm payroll. So I'm going to go ahead and mute my mic, and we're going to get into it.
So on El Salvador, IMF staff have ongoing and an ongoing engagement with the Salvadorian authorities, and the objective is to reach agreement on a new IMF-supported program that would help with the macroeconomic stabilization and adjustment, and also growth-enhancing reforms. Ongoing discussions are focused on policies to strengthen reforms that can be used to boost productivity and economic governance. Addressing risks arising from Bitcoin is a key element of these discussions. And of course, the goal is for the fund to be in a position to support a credible and well-sequenced policy package that is designed by the authorities. With respect to the details on Bitcoin, what we have recommended is a narrowing of the scope of the Bitcoin law, strengthening the regulatory framework and oversight of the Bitcoin ecosystem, and limiting the public sector exposure to Bitcoin.
So we want to play that because it is relevant. Who the hell are the IMF to tell anybody what to do with anything? You know, and the Diary of an Economic Hitman is a great sort of book to read. Let's talk, before we get into the markets, let's talk about, of course, what's happening today. Had some interesting data. We had great PMIs come out, and we did say PMIs would uptick along with the sort of everything cycles. You know, the global liquidity, which is going to be driven by central banks, and we know they're on path to do that through money creation via lowering interest rates. You're going to see business cycles do well, like the PMI, and we saw an uptick in that, the best PMI in over a year. And generally, we're not worried about the unemployment data. I think there's a lot of things that are skewing that in regards to historical accuracy. One of those things, of course, is immigration. Of course, the other is the elephant in the room, the pink elephant in the room, which is the locking down of countries and then the reopening of them. That's, of course, going to skew probably most likely unemployment data. But we do have non-farm payrolls today coming out half an hour after this video. The expectations are higher than the last. That would be a good sign, and certainly looking at unemployment to stay either where it is, so no major uptick in this kind of spiking manner that people are expecting, just like they thought there'd be a resurgence in inflation, the ding-dongs, but they were wrong, of course, because the context of the situation is simply different, and you always need to, you know, what is the context of what's happening? Let's think of this is going to probably be a really stupid analogy, but, you know, you've got something that happened when somebody did something, and that somebody's done something again, but the thing that happened was related to the event that, you know, the first time there was an event that caused that thing to happen. This time there isn't that event, but they're doing the same thing. You're not going to probably have the same outcome. If that makes sense, you know, I don't know if it does, probably doesn't. But we don't think there's going to be that resurgence in unemployment. You had ADPs come out, was it yesterday or the day before? Actually, rather positively. ADPs came out pretty good in terms of non-farm employment changes. I found that ADPs aren't that predictive. So we'll see what the unemployment data is. The dollar has been pretty strong recently. Let's talk about that first. Don't like this from the dollar. I thought this was going to be a target that triggered to the downside. We were expecting a bit of a bounce here. We thought that might be it. But ultimately, we do think the dollar's coming to the downside. This is what's ultimately going to allow risk assets to do. It's that macro context that we don't really want to talk too much about. But I just want to reiterate our stance on Bitcoin. We don't need our 4-year cycle rainbow chart. That this is just a pullback in what is a broader uptrend. The trend is your friend, and we do see every reason to expect resumption of it. And ultimately continuation in what is a broader uptrend. And we think you aren't far off that at all. This is very likely just a retest of your broadening channel sort of splitter, your midpoint, that's ultimately going to result in upside. We've got lots of technical targets. Even on the shorter time frames, we've got a technical target. You know, there's been nothing invalidated. We're very bullish on the likes of the stock market at this point, all going in the direction we want it to. The US 100, Nvidia, again, we were calling for long Nvidia. That's doing rather well. You know, there's lots of things out there that look pretty sensational, and we don't think there's any reason to panic and deviate from the course that we are on. But time, of course, will tell. When we look at like the likes of the Total 2, I think this is just a bull flag in what is going to be a significantly broader uptrend. We know we're in an uptrend, phase 1 base, breakout into phase 2, likely going to see continuation. Your trend is very much still intact. So that is really it from me, ladies and gentlemen. The last thing I want to do is we are currently hiring. We've had lots of applicants, and I want to thank each and every one of you for those applications. We are going to gather them all together, go through them, and then start to actually do over likely a Zoom call or something, interviews. But we are still hiring. It's not too late to apply. There's a link in the description. We are looking for a researcher that can create content on the back of that research. That ultimately can come up with research that we can sort of digest and use to inform the viewers of this channel in more of a sort of researched manner, and potentially somebody that can do a little bit of co-hosting with me if they're comfortable in doing so. That's not a sort of a must. The main objective in regards to us hiring is to bring on a researcher, someone that is passionate about the cryptocurrency space, can dedicate their time, that likes some of the projects that we're talking into and can dive into them in a lot more detail, to help me keep you guys informed. There's a link to that in the description. Do check that out. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to love and leave you. Thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you all in the next one.